and then he can begin.
And we're excited to be here with all of you. Welcome, everyone, especially those that are joining us via webcam or Zoom as you are joining us now. We're happy to be presenting this next segment of our day called Transforming Student-Centered Case Management and Guided Pathways, where we're highlighting Modesto Junior College as part of our Learning Cluster series that we've been doing around the state, and in particular here in the Central Valley with our wonderful coordinator that you'll hear from in just a moment. A couple of technical and housekeeping items that we wanted to first share with you. This is going to be a 1-hour webinar, and so we're going to try to keep it exactly to 1 hour. It's being broadcast live and in person here, but broadcast through the internet. The video and the slides will be recorded and shared, so you will have access to those. We're asking for folks, because we won't be having live exchange, we're going to be using the chat room to ask questions. We'd like for you to put in the chat room your name, your college. You know, if you have other folks joining you, you could either add their names or just say 5 people are joining me from such and such college. And if you could put that into the chat space, that'll be our signal to know who's out there joining us. The web technology that we're using, as I mentioned, we're going to keep everyone muted. We want you to stay muted because we're going to use the chat room as a way to communicate with you and for you to communicate back to us. So please disable your sound. And the other piece is that technology guidance and support has been provided and coordinated through Christina Sandoval. I think she's still in the back. She's sitting back here. Thank you, Christina, and Matt, who is from, I believe, Zoom, who is helping us with this live webinar today. Today's pathway, or what our agenda focus will be, is focusing on the learning cluster support that we're giving throughout the state, and we're having one college highlight their work as the title of this workshop states, Transformative Student-Centered Case Management. And that's Modesto Junior College to share their experience. We're having you also as part of the introduction in the chat room of who you are, who's with you, what college you're with. We're also asking for questions to be submitted through the chat room as well as part of the as the presentation goes forward, so that we can have ready to go questions at the end that would be facilitated by someone else. Let's see. The other piece is that you know, we have a live audience in front of us, and they're going to be engaging in a different way. But and if you have your handy device, you can also add your questions to the Zoom as well. Let's see. I think that's it. So I wanted to introduce the CLP team. I think we're going to have the next slide coming up. After that, this is our CLP team. I won't go into too much detail. These are folks that are here today providing support to the overall day and workshop. Amanda, Julian, Christina, and Valeria. Also here, not on a picture, is Jenny Malika as support documentation. So the next person I wanted to introduce to get ourselves kicked off and moving here is Dr. Lara-Brady, who is the Guided Pathways State Chancellor's Coordinator for the region, and we've been working very closely to provide service and support throughout the Central Valley, and these learning clusters are part of that support. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura. I'll give you this mic so that you can take over from here.
Thank you so much, Luis, and thank you to our panelists from Modesto and to anybody listening in outer space. And those of you present, we're very excited to have you here. And again, we thank you for your attention, for your time. We want to thank you for your work. For those joining us via webinar, I wanted to just briefly introduce the Vision for Success, which was presented in the summer of 2017. It was developed extensively through a process based on research, interview experts, and state key holders. There was also a virtual town hall to gather some feedback, but this is a comprehensive vision for change, and it includes a set of 7 commitments that taken together can move the community college system towards increasing the number and percentage of students that reach their educational goal, in doing this while decreasing the amount of time it takes them to do it, as well as the cost. All of this while addressing critical education gaps across student populations and regions. This is an opportunity for transformational change, and the vehicle that we're using to move this vision forward is Guided Pathways. This is a movement, a structural transformation that takes persistence, focus, and encourage to implement. So I thank you all for your work and for being here. Guided Pathways aims to remove the luck out of the equation. We're trying to knock down all the barriers that students face versus eliminating them. This is a way that you can be really transformational about your college experience and be really thoughtful about having a student-centered approach to that. We have been very blessed to work with a number of partners across the Valley, and I just want to give them a heads up. Again, Bill Basie from CAP is in the back. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to him. We also have CB Heck in the house, Virginia, it's in the back as well. Happy to support that work. But the way that these conversations have been coming, it's as the first regional coordinator in the Central Valley was seen as a beta site for a lot of the support provided for implementing Guided Pathways. And so to better understand the needs of the region, I dove into all the documents that you guys sent to the Chancellor's office, right? So this was your self-assessment and your work plans. And I had a lot to read. It was quite a bit. But it gave me a really good idea about where you were starting as a college, what were some of the challenges you guys were facing. But then I also took that a step further and met with every single community college in the Valley, all 14 of you. And I said, hey, what's working well and what's not working? And from there, all of these supports started to come up, right? So I came up with a list of needs that the Valley had. And, you know, again, this were based on my conversations with colleges. And this was a response to all the needs that were surfacing in the Valley. This was a very collaborative approach. But the way that we started approaching this was looking at what was already in place, right? So we currently have the IEPI workshops, Guided Pathway workshops take place about once a semester. They're great to disseminate knowledge. A lot of people attend, and we're very grateful for that support. But we also needed additional space to have some of these conversations. So the next one that came up was in-person targeted support. Some of the colleges needed specific support during the flex day, or training faculty leaders, or training GP leads in having a number of conversations, or even like how to approach meta majors. Some of those components were very targeted. And while this was very helpful for those colleges, it wasn't a sustainable practice that we could do at all times for all colleges. So then we have the tools, House of the Vision Resource Center, which I hope you guys log in. This is a place where you could continue some of the conversations on a day-to-day basis, share tools that you're using, download new tools that some of your neighbors are using. And then also the last piece that I wanted to highlight is the learning clusters. And this was kind of like the happy medium place where we could bridge the gap and keep the conversations going on a monthly basis. All the learning clusters are going to be web-based, so you can log in and from the comfort of your own office, join us, or you could check them out after, because all of them will be recorded, and they're going to be housed at the Vision Resource Center. So if you missed out the first one that we're highlighting the amazing work that Reed College has been doing with the foundational pieces in order to move forward meta majors, I encourage you to do that. Their next one coming up is in November, and it's going to be focused around data coaching, data support, data mentoring. So if anybody's interested, please sign up, RSVP for that one. But we have been doing this with a number of partners, like Luis mentioned this earlier. CLP has been phenomenal in providing support to the Valley. But we also work with the RP group, Research and Planning Group, which one of their arms is LFM, leading from the middle. A number of you I recognize from LFM. And then we also work very closely with the Academic Senate. They're doing amazing work. And we also work with 3CSN. We want to give them a shout out as well. So by providing this different levels of support, we hope to encourage peer-to-peer learning We hope to inform and encourage change processes to leverage regional partnership and resources, because amazing work is already happening in the Valley. You don't have to look outside. And just learning what your neighbors are doing, it's just phenomenal. And I think it's very important to move the work at your colleges. And also you could tap into them and say, hey, how did you start this conversation? How did you move forward? And so we're hoping to scale regional work statewide. Actually, a number of regional coordinators have joined. We have 2 in person here, Tim and Amy in the back. They're from the far north. And then we also have a number of regional coordinators log in, joining us online. So shout out to them. But you know, we want to showcase effective practice in the region. And so we're hoping that this will serve as a vehicle for that. But I thank you for your support, and I look forward to connecting with you to hear how we can support your implementation of guided pathways.
We're going to go ahead and get started. I'll introduce our lead speaker, and then he can introduce his team. That's Dr. James. Here we go. No worries. Dr. James Todd, and I'll turn it over to you and take it from there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here. I'll talk a little bit about myself in a minute, but I want to introduce an amazing team that was able to take some time out and come down here today. Although I did end up on the Clovis campus and then realized there was not a building B there. And then I found out building B was over here, but we made it. So I'm James Todd. I'm the Vice President of Student Services at Modesto Junior College. My colleague sitting to my left is Florida Arias. She is our Dean of Student Services. And next to Florida is Alicia Arceo, who is a coach for our students, and the title is a success specialist, part of our success teams, which we'll talk about today. And to my right, I have Anthony Frias, who is a counseling faculty at MJC, as well as Natalie Hassel, who's also a counselor at MJC. So we're all going to be talking a little bit about our roles and what's unfolded. I will say that I do not have a silver bullet for you to figure all of this out, but most of the work in kind of institutional change is relationship building. So we're going to talk to you about our process, the questions that we've asked. You know, how do we really tackle something that has been a big challenge for us as a campus? We are, oh, I don't know if we're going to ask a question.
Well, no, I can ask the first question to get us started. Could you please tell us and share with us a little bit about Modesto Junior College, which is you're about to do now?
So we are up the road in the Central Valley. We're about an hour south of Sacramento. Modesto is, MJC is a Hispanic serving institution. We serve about 24,000 students head count on an annual basis. Our FTEs are somewhere around 15,000 on a good day when our enrollments are doing fantastic, but probably more in the 14.2 range in reality. Which tells you a little bit is that our students are not taking full-time units throughout their careers. So we have a lot of part-time students. We service a lot of working learners just as much as we do our incoming students. But we are incredibly committed to equity at our college. We are an Achieving the Dream school. We joined Achieving the Dream about 3 years ago. If you don't know who they are, it's an organization that's kind of a coalition of colleges that have dedicated their efforts to thinking about their data and making transformative changes based on evidence that they have discovered at their college. That means talking with students, looking at what's happening on campus and trying to formulate decisions around data rather than just kind of anecdotal responses, and looking also out externally for coaching from professionals. So we started that work about 3 years ago. We are also an agricultural college. One of our largest programs for CTE is in agriculture, and we're incredibly well connected to the community. We started on our campus in 1921, so we're one of the older colleges in California. We're one of the only junior colleges in California as well, right? It's ourselves in Santa Rosa. We do also offer one of the baccalaureates in respiratory care at our college. Recently, though, when we looked at our data over the last 10 to 15 years, we've gone from about 30% of our students being Latinx identified to our incoming student class this last year was 56%. So we're asking some real questions about what is it, not how do you become a Hispanic enrolled institution, which is not hard, it's how to become a Hispanic serving institution. And that means we really have to think more about our multicultural pedagogy, our hiring practices, our representation on campus, and thinking about the diversity of the students that we meet on a daily basis that are walking through our doors. So I have an amazing team. They will tell you all of their experiences. I will say this about myself too. I am not from student services. I have been doing this job for about 3.5 years. And I started in instruction. I'm a cultural anthropologist. I started in 2006 and became the academic senate president on my campus, and then was worked on the statewide senate, was actually your area A representative from Bakersfield on up to Oregon for the Central Valley. And when this job became open, I coveted it because of equity. And I have learned student services from the ground up. And that has really given me a different lens coming from instruction and thinking about all of these folks that I tended to not interact with when I was in the classroom. And you know, I didn't know who my counselor was for anthropology. I didn't know who to call in student services. So I'm very mindful that there's a large gap there, but there are amazing people, classified professionals and faculty, both on the other side of the aisle for us to engage with on either side. So
thank you.
Pleasure of having you.
And I appreciate your sharing that background because it really sets us up for the next question. And that is, can you tell us about how your Guided Pathways journey, specifically how the redesign of advising began? And so you or others on your team.
So I'm going to start and we'll kind of weave through as the presentation goes through everyone's voices. This up here is a map. We're one of the 20 colleges that is, you know, inside the pilot of the California Guided Pathways project. So we have had a little bit of a start in this. Our work in student services actually preceded the Guided Pathways movement and just happened to intersect. But if you see up on the screen, there are 2 lines. One has to do with thinking about clarifying the path for students, making sure that we have real structures and instruction that students can move through, whether it's through their scheduling and their educational planning. But on the bottom part of this, that we have another line going through our college, which is the redesign of advising or re-engineering of advising on our campus. So we're working on both at the same time. We've started a lot of conversations. We've developed our schools, we're meta majors, we're doing program maps, we're thinking about scheduling. And on the other piece, we've been doing a lot of work with counseling and classified professionals on how to reorganize our work. But I will say it hasn't always, I'm always going the wrong way here, sorry. But we had a question that we formulated several years ago. And this was my own, I will admit, my own frustration as an administrator in student services, was that we had 24,000 students on our campus, and we have 20 counselors that are generalists, and then we have some special programs counselors. And we did, when we first got SSSP funding on our campus, hire a variety of success specialists. I think in the first year we hired 13 success specialists on our campus, and they didn't all get along. We hired classified professionals to help work and coach students, and the counselors and the specialists. Oftentimes there seemed to be some friction over who does what, how should we orchestrate our jobs. And quite frankly, that first year was very, very difficult in getting everyone to collaborate together for the need of students. And there was some work to be done to try to figure out how do we own all of our students. And that's what Guided Pathways is asking all of our campuses to do, right? How do you take the resources that you have and redesign yourself so that you're able to engage the entire community of those folks that end up on your campus? So part of our, I think, and Felita will probably talk more to this, but we needed to talk about what our purpose was. And I think a moment for our campus that helped to transform was about 1.5 years ago or so. We took time out for a 3-day retreat to talk about just counseling and classified professional work and student services and what we should do. And the question I posed, folks, was how are we going to own, or should we own, all of our students? And we went around the room and all the counselors and the classified professionals talked about why they do the work that they do. And that was actually incredibly compelling because we find out that everyone has a personal story that's connected with the community that we're serving and why we're at the college and why we like the work that we do. And so we left that meeting on the first day with the idea that we were going to try to own all 24,000. Not with the idea that we were going to go out and hire 17 more counselors, not that we were going to go hire 20 more classified professionals, but how could we actually do it? And part of the question was also posed was that we have, over 50% of our students are Latinx identified. We have a variety of other racial and ethnic groups on campus that are not doing as well as some of our higher performing groups. We had, equity gaps on campus. So how are we going to especially help those students, which was more than half of our population, to make sure that they succeeded? And so I posed that question to them. And as an administrator, my job was just to say, here's what we want to do. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I would like you to figure out how we can work together and meet the needs of all of our students. And so we still had a couple of days left, and this was really about building trust across our classified professionals and our faculty and our counseling faculty. And so I'll let Rita talk a little bit about what we did in that meeting.
Thank you, James. So being a proud Latina, daughter of farm workers all my life, I understand the population that we serve, and I see myself personally in the faces of our students that we serve, and it's important to give them a voice. The sleeping giant that has had no voice, and we're working very arduously under the leadership of Dr. James Todd to understand the students and hear them. So part of that also, we held some student focus groups, and we one of the main points that really came out of that was that students felt that they needed to feel connected. They needed to feel, those that were successful felt that they were engaged in one way or another through a special program or someone on the campus that connected well with them. So taking that information back to our counselors, we realized that we needed to do a systems change, and that was meeting the student where they are. And the students, not waiting for the students to find a counseling department, but that we needed to go and be where they are. And that would be in the buildings, within the classrooms. So it would be a change in the way we approach the work. So indeed, it was a challenge to conceptually how we saw ourselves as counselors, how we saw ourselves as specialists. But the other piece was building trust amongst the team, that no one was there to challenge their role, but that we needed everyone to come into the conversation. And so we learned to speak the language of inclusivity. We learned to speak together as one voice, even though we saw the work through different lenses, but that amongst counselors, in the roles that we all had as specialists and as educational counselors, that there was wisdom amongst them and that we could draw from that information. So we took some time, and folks actually selected. If you look at what you're seeing right now on the screen, these were actually the counselors and the specialists that decided which academic area they were interested in being part as a liaison. They had been a liaison to some of the areas, but no one had really talked to them, nor they had reflected what that really meant. So now that you are not only a liaison in the pathways work or the pre-pathways work, what would that look like? Will I be in the academic area? Do I need to know all the students in those programs? And so we all decided, as part of owning the students in our cohort list, is that we would get to know these students. And how could we then begin to look at activities that were scalable? And that was one thing, a challenge that Dr. Todd gave to all our teams, is that was, what are you doing? What can you do that is scalable? That they come and see you in the office, is okay, but there's no way that we could see all 24,000. So what are the things that we could do that we're touching them in different ways, not all the same because we're approaching them equitably. Look at our list, look using data, looking at our database that was provided through our IR office, is which students are being served through special programs, which students were not being contacted at all.
Thank you, thank you. The next question that we had is, and you already touched on it briefly, and that's the data, but more specifically, anything you could add about the role using data to make the case for focus area around guided pathways, and in particular, the redesign work that you all embarked on.
So I think that that's actually what we set out to do. And Farida alluded to it as well. I'm sure everybody in this room and folks that are watching, as you mentioned, in outer space. Hopefully, if you're out in outer space, this is not what you're doing. That's an opportunity that you want to copy. We all probably experience long lines outside the counseling office, right? Students that come in as first couple weeks of the semester or on, where we're not able to meet all of their demand. We're meeting with them one-on-one for an hour, perhaps for an educational planning appointment. And as Farida said, it's very difficult to get all of your students through and on track with these kinds of practices. And so this meant that we kind of needed to do some capacity building, not just around data, but also thinking more strategically about the practices that we have. Now, I want you to know, we still do a lot of one-on-one work, and we're still learning about this. But we have managed, because we reframed our data, it really changed the way that we're trying to approach our work. So if you, on these pictures, actually, this is our institutional effectiveness office that was talking with counselors about what they wanted. So we designed an in-house database system, and the counselors went around the room. They did two things. One, we talked about what they might want to see if they were going to filter through 1,200 students or 1,000 students, because by the time we did the math, each counselor and specialist team were provided with about 1,000 to 1,200 students. That was their cohort list. So it's a lot. And we asked them what do you need if you're going to try to sift through this that could help you prioritize students. And our priority was equity. It was about making sure we reach out and we meet the needs of the students that are marginalized, that are not doing as well as others, and try to sift through who needs something easy or who could get an information from kind of a larger workshop versus who needs real, special, specific work. So they asked for things like GPA. Are they first generation? What was their placement? How many units do they have towards degree? A variety of other things. I'm sure Farida will remember others, but we created an entire database for them to be able to sift through. Now, what's happened is mainly it's our specialists that are doing a lot of the sifting work, helping the counselors become much more efficient in the kinds of practices that they have. So the first bit was capacity building, and the other part that they did was they went around the room. We also talked about momentum points. So if you have 1,000 students, what do they all need to do by 15 units, 30 units, 45 units, and 60 units? How do we make sure that they're all getting these practices done and at scale? And so they came up with long lists. We're still trying to refine them the best we can, but we do have them, and we do try to make sure students are getting these things done. But it's also at scale. So if you're assigned to an area, one of the great things that you can do is then go with this database to the instructional faculty in this area. The whole design of this was not so that counselors and specialists became ultimately the advisors on campus. They were the only one that were interacting with students, doing student support, but instead engaging, for example, if you were given humanities, so that you go have a meeting with the folks in humanities and you say, here are your students. How are we going to work together to make sure that they get through? How can we message them? How can we have a humanities day that's at scale where we provide career services, educational planning workshops, where we introduce them to employers, where we have the local CSU come? How do you do things at scale so that students are getting what they need in a way that provides also time for you to do real intentional advising one-on-one with the students that most need it. So I think that that was part of our approach, and I'll let Clarita talk about this too, because then we had to give the reins over to folks to kind of own it. Oops, I'm going through it. Did I miss it? There it is, sorry.
So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Alicia, who's a success specialist, to talk a little bit about the data, and then I'll talk about the role of the counselor and the success specialist.
Thank you. So as James said, we as the success specialists really were probably the ones that go through the data and have enough time, because as you know, many of the counselors have students that need to be seen for walk-ins and appointments. So we spend a lot of our time getting to know who are our students in our divisions. And so it can look different for everyone, but really focusing on where is the high risk, who is at risk in our database, where is the need, and where should we focus our attention. And then also, as they mentioned earlier, and as you've seen, or actually it's up here, keeping in mind the different roles. So what can I do as a success specialist, and what can the counselor do? And where can we work together to support the student? Maybe where can we be more efficient with our time and yet effective so that the students are getting what they need? And so really just sorting through it, knowing who your students are. For example, I'm partnered with literature and language arts. And so I have, let's say, Spanish as one of the majors. And knowing that many of my students that are a Spanish major, they take the non-native path. And so what does that mean? What kind of challenges or obstacles do they have? How many males are in my division? Knowing those percentages, and then once I've identified maybe where those opportunities are, meeting with my counselor that is also partnered with the same division, and then talking about how we each want to reach out to those students, and maybe where she can focus her attention, and where I can focus my attention, making sure students have their core steps complete.
Yes. So on your right-hand side, we see a list of the student, when would the student see a counselor, and when would the student see the success specialist. And that was important to create so that we had a framework that from both sides, if you will, both counselors and paraprofessionals could feel at ease that we were not stepping on each other's toes. And that becomes important as you're building trust. Again, this is predicated on the basis of trust, relationships. And as the teams get to know each other, both counselor and success specialists, there is a lot of crossover. Even though in the beginning, everyone made sure that you're not doing this or you're not counseling if you're a success specialist. But I've noticed that as time has progressed, we hear less of that and more of how are we going to approach this better. And so that is building of the team. On the next slide, a lot of that work was created to what we call distributive leadership. Instead of James or I telling the counselors and the success specialists how they were going to do the work, it was really up to them to discuss openly how they were going to approach their area. And we had a no harm clause. If things did not work out the first time, there's nothing wrong with going back to the drawing board, because in the pursuit of excellence, one never gets things right the first time. So that understanding that we were all trying, what was the original purpose, original vision? We were all striving for that, to meeting the student where they are and how to do it best and most effectively and efficiently. And so this became a really great moment for all of us to realize that even though they felt vulnerable, they felt a lot of fear, but that we were creating a systems change. And nothing like a systems change to create more equitable results.
Thank you for that. You really, I think establishing the trust was so important, it sounds like, because in order to have these conversations that are tough, you need to have that trust built in. So it sounds like you accomplished that, especially around the roles. So what can you tell us about your approach in incorporating these new roles, especially around pathway success teams, and how have you successfully incorporated these specialists into this work?
So one of the things we did, I know I mentioned that we each have assigned divisions. All of us have at least a day that we spend out embedded into the division so that, as Florida said, we are out there meeting the students where they are. And all of that information goes out to the faculty so that they know as well. We go out to division meetings, all division meetings, we're in attendance. I have a standing time in which I actually give up updates and talk with faculty. So making sure we're building those relationships with the faculty as well as the deans so that they can continue, because they're the ones that are going to see the students the most. So if they do identify a need, they can send the students over to us. And then of course, having appointment times and outreach as specialists, we did receive some training from Inside Track, some coaching training. So no, we're not counselors, but we did have some formal training in regards to how to walk through students some of these challenges that come up. We also go out to some of the classrooms and do presentations. And then we spend a lot of our time going through some of the student files after we've identified maybe where there's a need and then reaching out to the students through email. So as part of my role, I do plan. Luckily, my division has a whole team that's dedicated to planning events for the division. And so I spend time connecting with them and planning. They actually even did the flyer. Just depending upon what the need is, I ask them, how would you like me to support you? I'm here to support you and the students. So let's talk about what that looks like. We had an English and Spanish major night earlier this month where faculty were in attendance along with students who are currently English and Spanish majors, along with some prospective students. So we were able to talk to them and capture some information from them. So we focused on careers that evening, and then we'll be doing a transfer night on October 24th and making sure that our students are basically ready to transfer. So it's going to be focused on transfer readiness, educating them about what needs to be done. So we will be focusing on students who are at about the 30 unit plus mark. And so we'll be doing some outreach there.
I think I'll just, one quickly too, is that the training that our classified professionals have gotten us in growth mindset, but we also have dedicated professional development on campus. For example, we held the Black Minds Matter series last year on campus. We work with the Center for Urban Education out of USC to help provide training and professional development on how are we best making sure that equity becomes part of the way in which we address our work, and also working with Frank Harris and Luke Wood as well, have given us a foundation of trying to think about, like, what is it that students need and how can we best meet their needs.
Thank you, James. And again, thank you for bringing such a wonderful team. Now I think we're going to move to hear from the counselors. How have counselors engaged in the concept of this infrastructure that you built with student success teams, and how have you successfully scaled that counseling work?
Okay, hello everyone, Anthony Frias. As an EOPS student, CalWorks student, I know how difficult it is, first generation student, to go to college. I know the difficulties it is that comes with that whole package of trying to make a better life, right? Trying to make it out over, financial freedom, right? Real freedom through education. So my cohort, or my group of students I work with, is physical health, recreation, physical rec, and health education. And I'm also working with our student athletes. I'm housed in the athletics department throughout the week. It's the best feeling because when I don't have walk-ins, I leave my door open, students are walking by. Hey, Anthony, how's it going? I build relationships with my students. I build relationships with the faculty, the instructors. That bridge is so important when you're working with instructors and students. This triangle that we have going, it's more than a triangle, but this small triangle with instructor, student, counselor, getting them the support that they need, and every student is different. So if it's support with an instructor, they're having difficulty in class, whatever their issues might be, I'm able to connect with instructors as they're walking by my office. Say, hey, Jamie, I had a quick question for you real quick, and I get to work. So being housed in the department is so important. I enjoy it. I wish I could be there all the time because I see the impact that it makes for our students. Working with specialists, the specialist that I work with is Crystal Hinchman. She's an amazing person. I love working with her. We meet every other Wednesday. We set goals throughout our 2 weeks when we're not going to meet, and then we come back and discuss things and how they went. And of course, we're connecting throughout the week as well. Just checking in and making sure that if there's any support needed from a counselor or the vice versa from a specialist to take care of our students. We have a homemade access where we get to make sure all of our students are matriculated. We get DI groups. We get to focus on certain students if that's our goal for our department or what our cohort's doing. We do freshman night for our student athletes. We do senior night. So we're out there in our divisions. We're inviting in prospective students as well. We do team workshops. I'm the athletics counselor, so I meet with all of our football players, our baseball players, our basketball players, but not only student athletes, the ones that are also part of my cohort, you know, rank education and physical education, all my kinesiology students that I see. We scale it by getting out there and working with the students where they're at. We go into the departments. We have workshops as well. Yeah. So we have workshops like we have we had a workshop for our health education where we have professionals that come in and talk about their careers. The instructors are also invited and they come in and speak on that. So it's an amazing opportunity for our students because a lot of students don't realize that one particular area of education is actually broader than what they thought. And so there's so much potential in one major or like a career. And it's just very powerful for our students to come in and they get a lot out of it, I believe. And they network with instructors and other students in their cohort. So that it's just an amazing time. It's a really good time for them to come in and learn more about what they're really trying to achieve at an MJC. I wanted to mention though, that the main thing for me is working with our specialists that in our division, it's priceless. It's so powerful. And if you guys can do that in your campus, I think you'll see the results will show on just your student and excuse me, I'm just tripping on my words, but it'll be amazing. It'll get results. There you go, amazing results. Right, thank you.
Hey, so I'm a counselor too. One of the things that I have been like the most excited about is some of the new freedom we've been given under our deans. Florida is my dean, and then I'm also I work with our CTE students. So Pedro is the dean over there, and he's given his instructors a lot of freedom too. And so I'm getting to know these instructors in such a different way than I ever have before. I've never been a tomboy, and so the CTE division, like welding, like I'm working with like the welders and the machine tool technology, stuff that I had like, pretty much no interest in. I did get a really cool yo-yo though, made by one of our students. So I'm getting to know the instructors in a new way, and that's all about the trust, right? That Fred has been talking about. We've been on field trips together, just kind of, so we've really bonded in our division, really getting to know them. So that has been instrumental in the trust building because now our instructors are inviting us into the classes. So what we're doing in the CTE division this semester is all of our intro classes. So intro to welding, intro to machine tools, computer electronics, all these classes, the instructors are giving us a half an hour. And our team, so it's me, another counselor, and our success specialist, we're going into those classrooms, starting the work of the ed plan. So introducing ourselves so our students now know who we are, what we look like, can find us. And then also the specialist is doing the matriculation steps in there within that half an hour. So they're leaving that class with a better priority registration date for the next semester. So we're really getting to touch our students in that first intro class. And we've done like over 400 ed plans this semester by getting into, it was 22 workshops we did in those intro classes. So that has been awesome. Another really cool thing that we did last semester, and again, in support of the deans, especially Pedro, he incentivized his instructors. So we also, semester before last, we did CEP workshop Wednesdays. And so every Wednesday we had food, lots of food, and invited the instructors to invite their students into our workshops. And whatever instructor brought the most students by the end of that month, so we had 4 workshops, did about 100 ed plans that way. And then the instructor who brought the most students had a prize, a monetary prize that their dean provided. So really got like the competition going, and that worked really, really well. Industrial electronics got a check for $3,000 at the end of that semester. So it was awesome. But I think that, so we're doing something so that going into the classrooms, we're calling it counselors on wheels. So, right, like the whole point of Pathways is to be more intrusive, right? To not just sit in our office and wait for them anymore. We're going and finding them. And so our counselors on wheels has kind of taken off. So we're really excited. We're really, really getting to see a lot of our students. And in the CTE department, that's a lot of our working students, right? So they're coming in straight from work, getting in their night class and going home. So a lot of these students had not had contact with a counselor before. So that's really exciting to kind of let them see that support and feel like they're a student instead of just I show up and take a class, but really starting to connect to MJC too. So that's been really exciting.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to try to wrap up with this next and last question about lessons learned. And so whoever makes sense to maybe take a stab at, there's so much to share about what you've accomplished and what you've done. And just scratching the surface in this short workshop, I think will hopefully get people interested in following up with you and your team to learn more from you. But for right now, could one of you share one lesson learned that you're taking away from the work thus far that you'd like to share with the audience here and audience on our webinar?
I would just probably start with going back to the relationships, and something that stood out to me listening to everyone speak would be the relationship with the deans. I think has been really instrumental to the specialists and counselors that have been able to make an impact. So I think it does start with leadership. Luckily, we had James and Florida to kind of initiate this, and then also our deans out of the divisions. So that would probably be the thing I would take away most from this.
For me, a lessons learned is never be afraid when you don't know the answer. And let's seek out and experiment, try it out. And if it doesn't work, go back. We have to be fearless in this work because this is about commitment to our students, the students that come out of our community. And if we are really in the business of changing lives, we have to not be married to an idea, because if it doesn't work, it's okay. Let's try this out again.
I'm always learning about my mistakes. So, I will say one thing that has helped in this is starting from the back end was really important, and I think a lot of processes that we're going through on campuses, you know, whether it's your AB 705 or it's everything that you're trying to accomplish, is what does it look like at the end result? How do you get to serve your entire community and work back from there? Was something I think that really helped us.
Yeah, to piggyback off Rita, she is my dean and fully supports our counselors. The thing that I've learned is that you don't have to do it alone. Networking is definitely the way to go. Definitely network.
Probably my biggest lesson learned is I'm not the smartest person in the world. So there are other people that I can take advice from and really, so like our instructors, right? Like I'm the counselor, like I know which classes these students need, and I know what general ed path, right, they need to follow, and I know all of this stuff, and I'm the professional. But our instructors really are the experts, right? Like they know their field so much more. So when a student's asking me, you know, well, what kind of job, you know, like, let's go talk to your instructor because he's held 7 of those jobs in his lifetime before he worked with us. So I think really humbling a little bit to be able to have the relationship, first of all, to even call them and be like, hey, I have this student who has a question about this class and I'm not exactly sure. And so I think that's been the biggest takeaway is now that I have relationships, being able to utilize their knowledge has been great.
Thank you so much. And we're going to move into the Q&A portion now, and I hope this doesn't mess up the webinar, but I think with our live audience here, could we give a round of applause and thank you to our wonderful panel here. They did such a great job. This is difficult and hard work, and you've approached it with such honesty, authenticity, and student-centered approach that is very admirable. We are preparing question and answer. So here in the audience, if you could write down your questions, I believe Amanda's going to collect them. She's walking around. And on webinar itself, again, the Zoom chat area is where we would want you to put down questions. That's currently being reviewed by a team. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Lara-Brady to ask, I guess, some questions and maybe get some responses from our team here.
Thank you, Luis, and thank you to all of our panelists. We have some questions online. The first one that we had, well, I'll give some time to Amanda to collect questions here. Somebody asked, on the integration slide, there were graphics that looked like an access database. What system are you using to track students and risk factors, et cetera?
So I wish I could say more, but it's more of a glorified Excel system that got kind of put into a more, usable frameworks. I don't think it's Plateau, but I can't remember what he actually used. But I know it operates very much like an Excel, but he put it into a much more visible framework. Oh, you did use Tableau? Okay. Yeah. I will say we're moving into Starfish, and that will be the major platform that we use to do all of our cohort work. But this was before we had Starfish up and running, and we're now using it fully as an ed planner on our campus. So we're just continuing to improve as we can.
Perfect. I was going to ask you about Starfish and how you're using it, but you went right through it. One question from our audience here is, what were the dynamics between student services and instruction before Guided Pathways, and how have they changed since?
So I'm fairly new to MJC. This is my 3rd year, but I've heard things were not cute. We didn't really get along very well, and I think that's basically because we never really spoke, right? So I heard most about instruction from our students who were complaining about the instructor for one reason or another, right? Only getting the one side, and probably vice versa, right? The students were complaining, yeah, I had to wait 4 hours and then the counselor was in such a rush to see me, and so relationships weren't great, but they're getting much, much better. I think just the trust building, we should have counted how many times we said trust today, but that has helped immensely because we're speaking to each other now and we're recognizing, okay, we're all in this together, right? We all want to own these students. We all want to see every student be successful and get out of here. And so I think that things are definitely getting better. And I think also with Starfish, one of the things I'm most excited for, we're still waiting for this piece to roll out, is the flag. So being able to raise flags, so an instructor is going to be able to say to send me a flag and say, hey, this student hasn't shown up for 3 days, can you check in or whatever. And so we're about to get another, besides picking up the phone or sending an email, we're about to have another device to communicate with each other, and I think that will only help those relationships.
One final thing to add to that is just that we're in the divisions now. We're present, and so we're able to communicate just through conversation, and team building definitely has changed.
And I'll add something to that too. I think that out of the Guided Pathways movement, the clarity of the paths I think is extremely important. That's for scheduling for a variety of things. But what's going to move the needle is our ability to work together across areas and know our students. And so if you can imagine, even though no one really likes program review, but if you imagine, since I've been using humanities as an example, humanities program review is about the students in humanities, and the counselor helps build that program review about how students in humanities are moving through the degree, right? And the events and the scale that you've approached it, and that's how you ask for the resources you need. That's really different. It's about the counselor and the instructor knowing who is in the program. We've spent way too much time thinking about course success rates, even though they're important, But the question is, how are students making it through programs? And so we've switched to the point in which our deans in student services have also been assigned degrees and certificates, just like our counselors have and our specialists have, right? We had 2 deans and we split them up and we said, you're in charge of these degrees and you're in charge of these degrees, so that they look at the data too and talk with their counterparts in instruction. So I think it's the most important thing that's going to probably move the needle for students.
Thank you. Oh, we have 2 other ones.
5 seconds.
This question is for counselors only. How many hours are you housed at the division department?
Okay, for me, my unique situation, I'm there 4 days out of the week. I am there 4 days out of the week for about 24 hours, roughly, in the division. So that's my unique situation. I'm not sure about Natalie.
We have 1 day a week in the CTE department, so we're there once a week for a full 8-hour day.
And then the last comment that we got is embedding counselors in the division is brilliant, and we got a happy face, so you can take this one home.
And on that, there was a lot of tension of what was happened to the counseling division, but we're not planning on getting rid of the counseling division. John Nixon, who's a coach for Achieving the Dream and also on the California Guided Pathways Project, he was also on the AACC project as well, told us, he said, you cannot get rid of the counseling or the student services division because they need to come back to share their knowledge, to share their practices, to have camaraderie. It's great to put them out in the division, but always make sure that they have a unit to come back to. So we really heeded that. I think there was scare, and it's actually one of my big faux pas was I was like, I don't know, you might get assigned to a different dean. That was the worst thing that I ever said. That was a lesson learned, just putting that out there. And then, John, you know, I learned to listen to our coach who put us on the right track, and that really has helped.
Thank you so much for that. Can you guys give it up for our panelists? They've been amazing. I hope you guys use them and lean on their wisdom and their experience and everything that they've learned to see how you could implement some of these pieces in your campus. They might work, they might not work, but please use them as a resource. They're amazing. They've been doing this work for some time. For the folks out there joining us on outer space, we want to give them a heads up about upcoming events in the Valley. For those of you joining us tomorrow for the IEPI workshop, there's a reception hosted by CV Heck tonight at the same hotel. It'd be great to see you. Please stop by. We also have a CV Heck at Policy and Legislative Summit taking place next week. And then lastly, we have the November Learning Cluster focusing on data coaching. Again, those will be recorded, so you could access them at any time. This will be recorded, and is going to be housed at the Vision Resource Center, so please check that out. But please let us know how we're doing. Take 2 minutes and answer the survey and let us know what other areas you need support on, how we could provide support in implementing guided pathways. If you need to keep listening to more topics around student support services, please holla. We're here to support you. But again, thank you so much for your work. You guys are amazing. Give it up for our panelists one more time. We're going to take a 2-minute break. Is that right?
2 minute, 3-minute break.
Oh, he was really gracious with extra minute today.
Thank you, everybody. Are we off?